It's Christmas Eve. I have a house full of relatives. I'm sitting between my children, and the house is full of holiday cheer. Everything feels right in this moment. And then my phone buzzes. One email, one line, one attachment, and something in me flutters. It doesn't feel right. Have you ever been in a moment where on the one hand everything feels right, and then all of a sudden something doesn't feel right? In a few seconds, I make a decision, and I forward the email. Fast forward 7 years. There's a moment when time stands still. It holds, suspended. I'm standing in a room where every sound feels amplified. The shuffle of a paper, the clearing of a throat. My heart's beating so fast I can feel it in my fingertips. I've spent my career in rooms like this. I'm an attorney. I understand risk, I understand documentation, I understand consequences. But in this moment, I have no control. I stand and I wait. I wait for a single phrase that will arguably change the rest of my life. Rashmi, Airan, you are hereby sentenced to 1 year and 1 day in federal prison. I did not wake up one day and just decide to compromise my integrity. I'm an Ivy League attorney, a Wall Street investment banker, a high performer, a mother of 2 children, the daughter of Indian immigrants. But I made decisions under pressure and speed and noise and the complexity and uncertainty of life that I never slowed down enough to question. And that's how it begins. Not in dramatic scandals, but in small, fast, defensible moments. And this is what ethical drift looks like when you're inside it. And in your world, every decision you make matters. They affect clients, they affect companies, and they affect the outcomes of every single thing you do with real consequences. So this isn't about me. This is about what happens to all of us when speed and pressure and responsibility collide. Because the truth is, none of you are going to prison, but every single one of you has experienced the drift. So by the time you leave here today, you will have a clear process to make better decisions when the stakes are high and every single moment matters. Meet the clarity loop. So this is what I believe. The real question becomes, how do you make those decisions? What's shaping them in those moments? I believe we're all stuck in these self-imposed prisons that look like glass walls that you can't see. Because I don't lack intelligence, I didn't have bad intention. But I was stuck in a place and I was operating inside something that I didn't realize. If you've ever felt like you've had to move fast, if you've been under pressure, if you've had a client breathing down your neck and you've got to make a decision fast, you've experienced a self-imposed prison. And in my experience, there are 3 factors that create our self-imposed prison. Pressure, perception, and pace. Let's talk about pressure. The pressure to perform, the pressure to produce, the pressure to prove. This is a moment when a deadline is looming and you don't have all the information. A client needs something right away and you need to answer him. Your client, your boss, your team is waiting for you, is sitting with you, and you don't have the answer. So instead of reflecting, you make a decision. Have you ever made a decision but you don't actually have all the information? You didn't actually evaluate it enough? Or ask for a second opinion? Or ask for help? Not because it's the best decision, but you make it because it gets the decision off your plate. It's not a character issue. It's basically you let pressure drive the decision. And then there's perception. The need to be right. The need to be respected. The need to not look wrong. And underneath all of that is fear. The fear of what will people say. The fear of being exposed. The fear of being wrong. And then everyone will see it. This is the moment when you don't ask a question because you're worried that you don't actually know the answer. Or you don't ask for help because you don't want to look weak. And in your head it sounds like, maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe everybody else who's been here longer knows something I don't know. And if I speak up, then maybe I'm going to be looked upon badly. So you just stay quiet. It's not intentional, but you stop worrying about being right because you're worried about how you're going to be seen and how will it look and your reputation. Have you ever sat in a meeting and just stayed quiet? You've looked around, and even though something doesn't feel right, everybody else is not saying anything. Yeah, me too. It's happened to all of us. We just don't want to look dumb. And so even if our gut is screaming, we don't say anything because we're worried about that perception of what will people say. And in that moment, clarity takes a back seat. And then there's pace. Faster is better, faster is rewarding, faster gets you achievement and results and awards, and jobs and clients and promotions. You don't even realize you're doing it because faster, speed, stops being a strategy. It becomes your identity. It becomes what everybody else is doing, your colleagues, your clients, your competition, your peers. So you feel like you've got to operate in speed. And this is a moment where you make the decision before you actually have done all the homework. You jump in head first because a client asks you to do something before asking him all the questions you should ask. You jump in head first with a client before doing your due diligence on the client. You might run a yellow/red light to get to your daughter's game. And you think it's just this one time. Everything is fine. It doesn't matter. Everyone else is doing it. And the faster you go, the faster you get rewarded, so you just go faster the next time. Be honest. Have you ever been on the phone and writing an email and have to make a decision right now? Before you had all the information? And you told yourself, I'll just make the decision and then I'll fix it later. Somebody else will fix it for me. So it's not carelessness. It's just speed overriding your thinking. You don't even mean it, and here's the problem. None of it feels dangerous. You're just operating under speed, and that's what you're used to doing. It becomes your identity. But when you're operating under pressure, and under perception, and under pace, you're just not deciding clearly anymore. And in that state, your self-imposed prison is making the decision for you. And whether you see it or not, it's there. And here's the problem. Because it doesn't feel dangerous, it feels like responsibility. It feels like you're being successful. It feels like you're being decisive, and everyone is awarding you for it. So you keep doing it. But when you're operating under pressure and speed, the decisions that you're making begin to shift. And this is where drift lives. It's not in bad people. It's in good people with good intentions, not having a process. So drift tends to show up, I think, in 3 ways. And I've really evaluated my life to understand this. And we're going to get into my story, don't worry. But drift first shows up because it creates the illusion that everything's okay. Second, you get caught between speed and accuracy. And third, your thinking begins to compress. Because research shows that under speed and under pressure, your brain begins to narrow. Your thoughts have a frame within which they begin to operate, because of that speed and pressure. So what's illusion look like? Illusion is actually the most dangerous aspect of drift, because you think it all looks fine. Hey, my competitor's doing it and she's okay. I'm handling it. It doesn't feel like a risk. So have you ever made a decision that in the moment feels like it was right? You make the decision, it's fine, and like months later you realize you missed a detail. Or you should have reviewed it better. And something comes up. Drift doesn't feel huge. It's a gradual drift. It feels like progress. It feels like you're continuing to move things along, which is what our jobs are for. It's what your clients are relying on you for. You all operate in one of the most complex risk environments in the world. Your clients rely on your decisions that are impacting risk, liability, and trust. But yet, you're dealing with cybersecurity threats, AI that's coming at you with data and decisions faster than you can track, government volatility, market uncertainty, talent shortages, decisions, metrics, regulatory pressure, laws that are changing. You guys are dealing with a lot. So the margin for error is 0. And on top of all of that, every single one of you has families and kids, potentially. And there are things that you enjoy doing outside of your jobs that actually matter to you. And so every single decision you make in every aspect of your life matters. And so the illusion that it's just okay to keep going and make these decisions fast is sometimes just a facade. So in that environment, you're expected to make decisions quickly every time, which sounds reasonable when you're doing it. But I believe it's a trap. Because the speed accuracy trap is that you can get it right, or you can go fast, but you can't do both. Because when you're in the moment, you're expected to move quickly and get it right, balance performance with responsibility, make high-stakes decisions without all the right information, and speed takes over. And so then urgency begins to make the decision for you, because you're trying to do it fast, which is not always going to be right. So in order to balance that, you start thinking to yourself, relief, get it off my plate, move it forward. Don't ask the right questions, just keep going. The danger is that speed starts to look like competence. Speed becomes more important than scrutiny. And in this moment, urgency takes over and makes a decision for you. You're not even reflecting. You're doing it out of speed, in a moment. And when that happens, something else happens. Your brain begins to compress. Research shows that when you're under pressure and speed, the compression of your brain narrows your thinking, not because you're careless, not because you don't care, not because you're incapable, but because your thinking narrows. You're thinking small. Not intentionally, it just happens. Your brain can't handle more. So this is compression, and unless you actually have a process to break apart the compression and actually expand it from autopilot, you're going to think small. So compression narrows how you start thinking in your perspective. So you're not looking at risk or nuance. Sorry, I don't know why I just slipped. You're not thinking about the consequences of your decision. You don't become unethical, you become decisive. You lean on pattern recognition. You lean on your past success. You lean on confidence. You lean on all the other people that are doing the same thing. And it's just a quiet belief that you can handle it. That it's just this one time. There's not any risk involved here. And in this compression, the gap between your intention and your action widens. And that's called the drift. And the drift is not something that you're trying to do intentionally. And unless we have a way to interrupt how the drift operates, we're going to continue to run on autopilot. And I believe this is a modern leadership challenge. It's not intelligence, it's not integrity, it's not ethics, it's awareness. How do we find clarity and awareness in every moment when the stakes are high? So let me run an example by you. Let's say a renewal is due. The client wants answers, the market is moving, There's a piece of information that's missing, though, in the application. It's not enough to stop it, but it's just enough that you should probably slow the process down. But your mind thinks, and you think to yourself, I'll just push it through and I'll fix it later. Right? It sounds reasonable. Because you're no longer optimizing for clarity, you're optimizing for relief. You're optimizing for speed. So this is exactly what compression looks like, because that's the moment. When you walk into that process, you're not planning it. You just think, it makes sense this one time. So I'll just push the application through. And that's exactly what compression does. The moment where nothing obviously looks wrong, the moment where the decision kind of feels reasonable, the moment when you compare yourself to others in your competition, you feel like you have to do it to keep up, and you start comparing yourself to others. Because it's not a cliff, it's a drift. It's a slow, gradual drift, and it begins with illusion. You get trapped between speed and accuracy, and then it deepens with compression. And unless you have a process to stop that autopilot, your thoughts will continue to drift, because we are human beings that are flawed. So in our businesses, we have guardrails for everything. And I believe we're missing guardrails around our thoughts. That in business, you all have guardrails for your people, right? You have HR, you have onboarding, you have training, you have guardrails for your technology. So you have cybersecurity, you have onboarding and processes for passwords. You have guardrails for your processes. So you have standard operating procedures and compliance. And then you have guardrails for your outputs. So you have quality control, things like that. But what we don't have is guardrails for our thoughts. And I believe that when we can institute a mental process for guardrails around our thoughts on how we make better decisions, that will change everything. So I didn't actually come up with this process that I'm going to share with you because a teacher taught it to me or a boss taught it to me. It actually roots with my grandfather, a man I never got to meet. His name was Banarsi Das Saraf. He was a freedom fighter with Gandhi against the British. And as it turns out, on the day that my father was born, in 1946, my Dadaji was sitting in jail with Gandhi. So I grew up with stories about my grandfather, who was this tenacious survivor who never gave up. And India, of course, gains its independence, but the country's in turmoil, the economy is in chaos, and our family, we were jewelers, we were struggling. We didn't know from one day to the next if we would make it. They didn't know if they'd have enough food. So my dad decides that he's going to come to America to achieve the dream. He marries my mom in 1970, and with $8 in his pocket, he comes to America with this simple belief that with hard work and with education, they can make it. Eventually, when I'm born, about a year ago, I'm born into this legacy of courage, of justice, and of never, ever giving up and following my core values. When I was little, I used to argue with my dad, basically about everything. So one day, I'm sitting in the car, and he's driving, and Dad looks over at me and he goes, "Rashmi, you should be an attorney one day, because you're strong, you're confident, and then you can argue with whoever you want." And I look over at him and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be the best attorney I can be. And from that day forward, I created this idea that success is going to come the faster I go. And the faster I go, the more rewards I was going to get. I got the grades, I got the awards, I got all the accolades, all the things that we think we have to get to as high performers, right? And then eventually reward became my self-worth. And all of my self-worth, all of my self-love, all of my career, like self-esteem was rooted in achievement. It was rooted in the schools I went to, the grades I got, the awards I won, how much money I made. Anyone relate to that? Yeah, we're all high performers in here. And somewhere along the line, these formulas that I didn't even know existed began to fuel me. And everything became a race. Everything became defined by what I was doing. So yes, I went on to UNC Chapel Hill. Any Tar Heels? Chris isn't here. He was a big Tar Heel fan. I worked on Wall Street at Morgan Stanley, and then I went on to Columbia Law School. And yes, at every one of these places, I graduated top of my class, won all the awards, all the things. I was doing and following my path. I was following my formulas. Eventually, by way of California, I end up back in Miami, and I marry a firefighter. And we have these 2 young kids. Aren't they yummy? Can I tell you, I don't remember taking this picture. Because at this time, I had just started my solo practice. I was a mompreneur, solopreneur. I had 5 people that worked for me, and I was hustling. I was going to every dinner, every networking event. I was selling my services at the gym. I was missing dinners. My kids started asking me, Mommy, when are you coming home? I started having marital problems. And it was in this context in 2007 that I had the opportunity to meet a real estate developer. Who remembers what was happening in 2007? Come on, you guys remember what was happening in 2007. Right? The real estate crisis, the real estate business was crazy. It was before the crisis. And I was a real estate attorney. I was doing transactions. And I was trying to get every possible closing that I could. So in 2007, somebody says to me, hey, do you want to meet a real estate developer? In my mind, I was like, yeah. If I can meet one big client and land him, that means volume business, that means financial stability, that means more time with my kids. So I remember I went into his side office, which was in Miami Beach. I sat in his conference room. The developer himself was in his office. His 2 operations guys came in and sat with me in the conference room. And they began to describe these scenarios that they were doing. And essentially, they were doing creative real estate transactions. The first thing they said was, hey, we've been working with this big law firm, but we'd like to come and work with you. Which, by the way, should have been a huge red flag. Because I should have been like, why? Because that big law firm has more bandwidth, more people, more experience. But you know what was going on in my head? There's something special about me. I was arrogant, and man, did I want the client. I was so hungry for the client that I was blinded to asking the questions I should have asked. Essentially what he was doing is he would say, Scott, if you buy my condo unit, I will give you a 2-year rental guarantee. My management company will manage it for you. Everyone was buying investment property. You won't have to worry about a rent for 2 years. Sounds reasonable, right? It's creative, buyer incentives. Now, as a real estate attorney for 2 years, I had already been closing transactions for buyers that were buying incentives from other bigger developers. So I knew this was sort of common. I also had closed all these deals, and I thought it was okay. And I justified, and I rationalized, and I assumed, and I didn't ask any questions. Within 2 weeks, I had my first closing request, and I jumped head first. It was like a steamroll came in, and I never took the time or made the time to do the due diligence I should have done. By the way, guys, I am surrounded by attorneys. My parents are attorneys, my mentors are attorneys, many of my friends are attorneys, right? I could have gone to any number of people to ask for help. And I didn't. I realized now because I didn't want to know the answer. I wanted that client. I wanted the financial stability that went with it. I wanted the nights at home that went with it. 2 months later, I was sitting in my kid's bedroom on that Christmas Eve. And that year, my entire family descends into Miami for like a family reunion. So my aunties, my uncles, my cousins, my nephews, my nieces, you get it. You guys all come from big families. They come in from all over the world to Miami, and they're in my house. It's 8 o'clock on Christmas Eve, and I go into my kids' bedroom to make them sleep. They're 2 and 3. You can smell the pine tree of the Christmas tree. You can hear the Christmas music. The kids have just baked Santa cookies, right? We've just drank eggnog. So I go into my kids' bedroom to make them sleep. Maya was in her crib, and Kyler was in his toddler bed, and I'm singing the same song to them that my parents sang to me as a kid. It still makes me nostalgic. So as I'm singing to my children, I look down at my BlackBerry. Okay, guys, this is how long ago this was. I look down at my BlackBerry, and the email pops in. And the email is referring to a closing that's going to happen in 2 days. So the first question is who expects me in this room? Who thinks I should answer this email at 8 o'clock on Christmas Eve? Anybody think I should answer this email? See, you guys are reasonable. I am a woman, entrepreneur, trying to run a law firm, and trying to beat out every other attorney. And I pride myself on customer service, and I pride myself on speed. So I answer the email. Well, I open it at least. And I open it, and there's one line. The one line reads, buyer to receive $70,000 from rental guarantee. Anybody else think that's kind of odd? Big number? It was like a sucker punch. I was like, oh, that doesn't sound right. That sounds like way more than we had talked about. But okay, there's an attachment. And they said it's for a rental guarantee. And within seconds, I forward the email to my closing coordinator, expecting that she'll open the attachment and she'll tell me if there's something I should be paying attention to, something that's different from what they had promised. But I'm the boss. I'm the attorney. The buck stops with me. So why do I forward this email so quickly, even though clearly I was concerned? Well, I have a house full of relatives. It's almost Christmas morning. My kids are not yet sleeping, and none of my presents are wrapped. Have you ever forwarded an email and not actually paid attention to the details? Or maybe not opened the attachment, even though you should? I see a lot of shaking heads, because we've all done it. So I did about 15 months of closings for this client, about 200 closings. And then all of the units sold, I stopped working with him, and I merged my practice with my father's. And now we're not doing transactional work anymore, we're doing litigation work. The foreclosure business is booming, and we're representing NationStar and Ocwen and Fannie and Freddie, and now I'm representing these big institutions in their foreclosures, and I grow my practice by 1,200%. I'm running around to conferences, and I'm managing a law firm. And things are good. 4 years go by, and 2 FBI agents show up in my office. Anybody here deal with the FBI ever? Oh, somebody back there. It is really freaking scary. And nobody tells you that when the FBI comes, you can actually say to them, hey, can I take your card and I'll call you when I have an attorney with me? And they're like banking on that, right? Like they're counting on the fact that you're intimidated by them. And fear takes over, man. Human nature takes over. And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't do anything wrong. This is 4 years later. My files have passed audit. All my escrows are clean. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I got to talk to them. Because if I don't talk to them, they'll definitely think I did something wrong. Okay, so I let them into my office. I used to have this circular table by my desk. They sat at the desk, the circular table, and they grilled me for 4 hours. They're showing me documents and emails and attachments and pictures, and I'm answering these questions, yes, no, as if I could remember what happened 4 years ago. I mean, nobody has that kind of memory, right? So they leave. 2 more years go by. And I now get a grand jury subpoena for documents. So I'm still operating with this pretense that I haven't done anything wrong, right? I'm the records custodian. They just want my files. So I give them all my files. Now, by this point, I did actually ask an attorney to help me. The attorney I asked was the former U.S. Attorney of the Southern District, who happened to be a mentor of mine for 20 years, like a father figure. 3 months after we submit those documents, his name was Kendall Coffey, Kendall calls me into his office and he says, "Rashmi, you're a target." I didn't even know what that meant. Like, I'm not a criminal lawyer, I'm a dirt lawyer. I don't understand what that means. And once he explained it to me, I literally collapsed on his couch. And I was shaking uncontrollably. Because this was my whole life. This was everything I had worked so hard for. And all I could think about is, I'm disgracing my parents, I'm disgracing my kids, I'm disgracing my community. I sat on a lot of boards in Miami and I thought, what's going to happen to them? And I did not know how I would ever come back from this. And I tried really hard to avoid indictment. But in April of 2014, I was indicted for 1 count of conspiracy to commit bank fraud and 24 counts of bank fraud. They took 24 deposings, attached it to the complaint, and indicted me. And I pled not guilty. A couple weeks later, my parents are leaders in the Indian community in the Indian community in Miami. And so it was really important to us that our Indian community heard it first from us. So we called like 50 of my aunties and uncles to the house, fed them samosas, of course. And then they all came and we were in the living room of my parents' house. And I'll tell you that before this evening, I was so sure that every single one of these aunties and uncles would shun my parents after this. That I had disgraced my parents so much that they would walk out and never come back. Because the only reason they love me is because I'm a superstar. So Dad was standing in the corner, and I'm sitting on the couch. My mom is here, and one of the uncles is sitting here. And Dad tells everybody that I had been indicted. And Dad's crying, and I'm crying. And my mom is here. She's hard as nails. She's not the crier. And this uncle sitting here says to me, "Beti, one day you will realize that this is not happening to you, this is happening for you." I can tell you that in that moment, I did not get it. But it became a seed that got planted in the back of my head. By the way, I see some of you guys taking pictures. Awesome. You will get a toolkit. There'll be a QR code at the end, so I'll get you a summary of all my slides, but feel free to take pictures also if you want. I love having you take pictures. In that moment, I had to recognize and understand eventually that I don't understand why this is happening. But my uncle kept saying, there will be something for you from this. I mean, how could I have imagined that I'd be sitting here 10 years later in front of all of you? Because we don't know sometimes when we're in the darkness. So a couple months later, I was at my attorney's office. He called my parents and I in for a meeting. So it's August, and trial was set for December. So he said, "Hey, can you bring your parents in? We want to have a meeting." Now, I had hired another friend of mine, David, to be my trial attorney because Kendall said he should be my character witness, which is a very legal strategy conversation. And David said, "Hey, can you and your parents come in?" And I've known David for 20 years. Like, we lived down the street from each other. His wife went to college with me. Our kids are friends. I taught at UM Law School with him. Like, I know this guy, right? We're friends. And I walk into his office with my parents expecting to talk about trial strategy. Like, we're going to talk about exhibits, my testimony, expert witnesses, our strategy. And instead, his partner Margot stood up and gave a presentation, and David sat next to me. And Margot said, "Rashmi, if you go to trial, this is what's going to happen. The government's going to stand up and give their case, and they're going to give some evidence. And then we're going to stand up and give our rebuttal and give some evidence. And then the government's going to stand up and give their follow-up." Any guess on their evidence? Who can guess what their evidence was for the rebuttal? Yeah? The email. How could I have known 7 years earlier that an email I sent on Christmas Eve would end up being the nail in the coffin for my indictment? Because here's the thing. Every single decision we make matters. Even when we think it's just this one small thing. Even when we think it's okay. And he looked at me and he goes, Rashmi, I know you didn't walk into this planning a crime. I know you. We're friends. You're a good person. But here's the thing. You're an attorney. You have a fiduciary duty to do more. And if you go into a trial, the jury's going to get a whole host of jury instructions, but let's talk about 2 of them. The first jury instruction that we discussed was conspiracy. The conspiracy jury instruction says, if the defendant knew even one detail out of 500 million, you, the jury, have to convict her. And he looks at me and he goes, Rashmi, your name is on every settlement statement, every document, every check, every email. Do you think a jury is going to think you didn't know at least one detail? And oh, by the way, you did know that there was a buyer incentive. Now, what had happened was when I went through discovery, which was 200,000 pages and 15,000 emails over a few months, I learned that this developer and his people were doing a lot of things that I did not know outside of my file. But see, none of that mattered. I knew that there was this buyer incentive that was being disclosed, but not exactly how it should have been. And the second jury instruction that he talked about was willful blindness. So I'll put this in my words, not legal. You can't put your head in the sand. You can't pretend not to know what's happening around you. Because not doing something is still doing something wrong. He looks at me and he goes, Rashmi, you're going to have a coming to Jesus moment. Which, by the way, is funny because he's Jewish and I'm Hindu. But in that moment, I literally had to take off my fighting hat and put on undershirt. I had spent my whole life trying to be this perfect little Indian girl. And now all of a sudden I was going to have to be a felon for the rest of my life. And this is before I got sentenced. And I had no idea what I would do after this. I had no idea how I would try to help people after this. So one of the things that was important to me was in this process of owning it and taking accountability. As I said, I sit on a lot of boards in Miami and I'm very involved in the community. I didn't know if there'd be a press release from the U.S. Attorney's Office. I certainly didn't want people to gossip about it. I didn't want people to talk about it, right? So I decided, because I'm an anal person, I made a spreadsheet of like 200 people in my life. Friends from elementary school, college, law school, Morgan Stanley, friends, my kids' friends' parents, my kids' teachers, my managing partners of law firms, politicians in Miami, executive directors of nonprofits that I'm involved in. Essentially people that knew my character and my history. And one by one, I picked up the phone and called them. And just like I've told all of you today, I told them. Now, I'm a decade out from this now. Can you imagine then how scared I was? And what I learned is I walked through shame and told everybody. I was so sure that as I picked up the phone and called them, that every one of them would hang up on me. I had the same fear of when we called all our Indian friends to the house. And something magical happened. By me owning it, the judge got 182 letters of support. It's like I got eulogized before I died. Who gets that opportunity? Friends shared stories about the way I had touched their lives when I was 12 that I didn't even remember. right? Like, we don't realize how we're touching people's lives in the smallest of things that we do. And what I realize is that people are very forgiving of our humanity when we give them a chance. I think social media, society, we are so caught up in this world where we think we have to be perfect and have this aura and not share the hard stuff. One of my friends said, Rashmi, you stood naked and exposed for all of us to judge you. And we did. And we got to see ourselves in you. We got to teach our kids about you. And we love you. It was like one of the biggest lessons for me as an adult human being who had essentially believed my whole life that people only loved me for my achievements. And yet I realized people actually love me for me. Okay, so how many of you have actually been in a federal courtroom in the United States? Oh, somebody over here. Okay. Maybe some attorneys in the room. All right, so a federal courtroom in the United States is about as long as this room, a little narrower. High ceilings, no chandeliers though. It's not like that nice. On the day of my sentencing, which was a hot June Tuesday morning, all of those 182 people showed up for me. They surprised me and flew in from New York and drove in from Charlotte and flew in from California just to be there and show the judge that they loved me, that they believed in me unconditionally. And I walked up to that podium in the middle, and the judge sat like up on a pedestal at his table. And I gave what's called an allocution. And an allocution is a defendant's apology. So I apologized to the judge, and I turned around and I apologized to my family and community, and I promised to do better. I promised to come back and be better. And to grow and learn and do something. And I didn't know what that was yet. But I knew it was happening for me, not to me. And then the judge sentenced me to a year and a day in prison. And when that happened, no exaggeration, I fell down on the ground. I was crying, like uncontrollably. And it's not that I was scared for me, right? I am my grandfather's granddaughter. I'm a fighter. I'm a survivor. I can get through anything. Who was I scared for? What's going to happen to my kids? Who will love on them? Who will drive them to soccer practice and football practice and basketball practice and do their homework with them, right? Like, who will love on them? Because by this time, I was already separated. So I had 2 months to surrender. And on the morning of my surrender, I had a few wishes. I used to be an avid runner, so I wanted to run at sunrise and pray with my family in my happy place. So one of my happy places is Matheson Hammock Park in Miami. And I wanted to run at sunrise. Rashmi means the rays of the morning sun, so it's spiritual for me. You can see that my son's not even there. He couldn't do it. He was so emotional. You can see my dad's crying, and my mom is not. It's definitely a theme in our family. And in this moment, I felt so scared. I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea what was going to happen, but I knew I had to surrender, and there was no option for me, right? Because then I became, or they tried to get me to become 05121-104. Right? They didn't want me to be Rashmi Airan anymore. And during that time, I had a lot of time to think. Because the surrender process can only be described as dehumanizing. Right? They try to strip everything away. Your clothes, your dignity, all of it. And all the things you can imagine, I went through. Stripped, searched, handcuffed, shackled, all of it. So the kids would come visit me every few weeks. It was 5 hours each way. By the way, you might see that orange is one of my brand colors. Okay, it's not because of Orange is the New Black. Orange is actually the color of transformation. So orange and Carolina blue are my brand colors. But safari green was my prison color. So those of you that are wearing safari green, yeah, you will never catch me in safari green ever again. I'm a little traumatized. So when the kids would visit me, right, they would go and we would play apples to apples. Anybody know this game? So this was a game that we played because all they wanted to do was hug on me and love on me and play games with me and spend time with me, right? I learned to be present with my kids. I learned to just be there with them and ask them questions about their life because I had spent my whole life hustling, missing so much of their childhood, trying to achieve. Because we get caught up in the dream and we think the dream is achievement, money, goals, all these things. And yes, we want to do all that, but it's for them. And when I was in prison, I don't know if those of you that have seen Orange is the New Black, my cube was something similar, but it was a bunk bed. And I used to sleep on the top bunk. And you see that ledge? I used to keep a gratitude journal there. And I had a lot of time to think. I had a lot of time to try to deconstruct what went wrong. How did I end up here, in prison, when I was the perfect little Indian girl until I wasn't? How did I go so off path in a moment of pressure, speed, and noise without even realizing it? And I learned and I realized that I used to think I was free before I lost my physical freedom, but I was never actually free. I was imprisoned by my thoughts. I was imprisoned by what society thought I had to achieve. I was imprisoned by what I thought I had to achieve and my cultural pressure. And I was imprisoned by how I thought I had to perform. Right? I was always caught in a self-imposed prison. I just didn't realize it. And I had to lose my freedom to gain that complete freedom of thought and the understanding. So when I came home, I decided I had to understand and deconstruct what went wrong, and I began to do research. So I've done a decade of research around behavioral science, psychology of decision-making, cognitive biases to really understand what went wrong in my life so none of you will ever make the same mistake. Because we're all caught in the drift and we're all caught in self-imposed prisons. So, after years of research, this is what I discovered. We need the guardrails for our thoughts. So, it's not a slogan, it's not a mindset shift, right? This is a process. This is a process you guys, every one of you can take back to your teams. You can implement, it's going to create better trust, and I'm going to walk you through it. It's a way to interrupt the automatic thinking that we get stuck into. It's a way to actually think about every single decision that we're making and find clarity. So I call it the clarity loop. It's simple, it's 4 questions, and I'm going to walk you through each question encompasses all of my research of a decade. All right, so before I go through it, every one of you has a worksheet on your table. Please feel free to grab it, and we're going to walk through it together. Hopefully each of you has a pen. Okay, so as you're doing that, I'm going to share what happened, because I want you to know how this works in real time. Does everyone have enough? Because we have some extras. Anybody not have one? All right, cool. All right, so I had an executive, I do a lot of coaching and leadership training as well. And so I had a leadership, executive coaching client who I was meeting with, and one day he walks into my office, well, it was a virtual office, and he was like really frustrated and angry. I'm like, what's going on? I could tell he was like rigid, and his jaw was tight, and his shoulders were tight. I'm like, what's going on? Why are you so upset? And he tells me that he had just lost a revenue-changing client to his competitor. And he's frustrated because the competitor overstated outcomes, misstated data and performance, past performance, and basically used unethical means to land the client. Sound familiar to anybody? Yeah, it happens in life. So before we keep going, and as I go through the questions, I'd like for every single one of you to think about a decision that you just made, or that's pending and you need to make it sitting in your inbox. It could be for a client, it could be for a child, it could be for a friend, a spouse, a teammate. What's one decision that you don't feel comfortable with yet, or you need to make? Okay? All right, so I'm going to walk you through, and you're going to see exactly how the clarity loop works. The first question is simple. What am I feeling right now? This is what happens. When emotions are running the decision, we are activated by emotion. So the pressure drives us, and then we feel, let's say, fear. In my case, I felt pressure to perform, to land the client, to make my parents proud of me, to look good in society, to keep up appearances, to make the money. But underneath all of that was fear. Fear of not deserving the rooms I wanted to be in. Fear of not being seen as equal. Fear of not being able to survive. Fear of not being able to pay my staff. But you see, I didn't label it as fear, I labeled it as ambition and success. But when you can actually identify the emotion, in my client's case, he said, I'm angry. I feel threatened. I'm scared that if I don't do what they're doing, I'm going to continue to lose clients. So I want you to think about, for the decision you have to make, what's the feeling you're feeling right now? Be honest with yourself. This is only for you. Is it fear? Is it shame? Is it anxiety? Ego? Resentment? Just take a moment to be honest. Ooh. All right, once you name the feeling, something shifts. Because then you're actually not activated by your emotion. I remember when I was making this decision to work with this client, I was activated by all of that fear that drove me to want this client that badly. And I didn't know to ask myself, how am I feeling? I was just in overdrive, operating under pressure and speed and noise. Right? Second question, what story am I believing? In my client's case, the story he was telling himself was, if I don't do what the other competition's doing, I'm going to continue to lose clients. And then my business won't survive. The story I was telling myself was, I need this client to survive. I need this client to save my marriage. I need this client so I can get home to my kids for dinner. The narrative that we tell ourselves becomes exactly what we want to try to prove. And then we start believing the evidence that supports the outcome that we want. It's called confirmation bias. Or there's self-serving bias, which is you convince yourself that everything you want is right. The decision you're telling yourself, so you only take in the information that's going to serve you. And that self-serving bias is a trap. You begin to rationalize, and you make meaning out of the story that you just created, which is just a story. You've created an entire narrative in your head that's actually not the truth, right? Because life is not binary. It's not like I have to get the client or I'm going to not survive. That's not how it works. But in the moment, that's what we think. So what story am I telling myself? The next question is, what matters most here? And this is where we go from reaction to alignment. This is where we start thinking about moral awareness and moral judgment. And research shows that these are the two components of how we make decisions that we rarely get to, because they're rooted in core values. But if we're reacting based on emotion and the story we're telling ourselves, we don't ever get to our core values. Moral awareness is just the awareness of what's the morality of what I'm about to do, and then you pass judgment on it. Because this is what I know. There is a line. I call it the ethical reality line. And on the right side of it, in the gray area, there's disruption and strategy and profitability and like all the good stuff. But on the wrong side of the line, well, that's the drift. And if you're not rooted in your core values, you're going to drift. If you're not paying attention and passing judgment on the decision you're about to make, you're going to enter the drift. It's interesting, I work with a lot of corporate clients in coaching and executive retreats, and many of them don't know their core values. Who here knows their 2 core values? Oh my gosh. Wow. We're going to have to do a session, Carmel, on core values. Yeah, it's really important to know and be rooted in what are your core values. Because if you don't know what your core values are, what are you making decisions based on? Because our core values, we're trying to find alignment. Every action, behavior, decision, thought should be aligned with your core values. I can tell you my core values, because they evolve over time based on your life experiences. Mine now are courage and family. The final question is the most important, which is what choice can I own later? This is the idea of moral humility. Has anybody heard this term before? Okay, moral humility is this one acknowledgement. I am capable of drift. I, in a moment of pressure, speed, influences, anything that could be going on, I am capable of drift. And if I'm capable of drift, I need these guardrails to think better. I need to recognize and see myself 5 years from now and know, can I own this choice in front of my board, in front of my team, in front of my boss, in front of my kids, in front of the newspaper, in front of my community? Because you see, I didn't ask myself that question. I made the decision and I moved on. And I didn't think about, what happens in 5 years if these loans go sideways? I didn't know all the details, but I knew I should have asked. So what choice can I own later? It's about accountability. It's about humility. It's about knowing that every single decision we make, we have to believe in it and own it and know that if it becomes public and it's on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow, I'm okay with it. That is truly owning it and taking accountability. So that's the clarity loop. What am I feeling? What story am I believing? What matters most here? And what choice can I own later? And if any of you are thinking, I would never go there. Like, that would never happen to me. I'm smarter. My parents taught me better. That's the most dangerous assumption in this room. Because drift starts with separation. It starts with believing that we are somehow different from others. That we are somehow different and brought up differently, have learned differently, have, lived our life differently. We're more ethical, we're more in control, we know more people. This would never happen to me. And I learned something about this while I was in prison. So I had spent 5 months in federal prison. And then I got sent to county jail to testify in another case. So I'm handcuffed and shackled in a waist chain, and I'm in an armored van, and I'm sitting in an armored van being driven to county jail in Tampa. If you know anything about the system, the federal system and the county system are very different. The demographics are different. The people in the system are different. And as I'm driving, handcuffed and shackled, in an armored van, I'm thinking to myself, after 5 months in federal prison, I don't belong with those women. I don't belong with the women in county jail. I'm an attorney. I'm educated. I don't belong with them. And I get there and I spend 23 days with these women. Cooking, eating, praying, crying, sleeping, getting them to work out with me. And above me was a woman who was in for prostitution and selling drugs. And next to me was a woman in for homelessness and selling drugs. And above her, a 24-year-old in for meth dealing with a 4-year-old at home. No, not everyone's in for drugs, but happened to be in my room. And after 23 days, I think to myself, how dare I have the audacity to pass judgment on these women? Because we are just drops from the same ocean. We are all human beings living a flawed existence, trying to figure it out. And they were my sisters. They became my friends. How dare I pass judgment on them? One day we were watching TV on these cold, hard metal chairs that were blue, stuck to the ground. And we were watching the TV that was stuck to the wall, like the DMV. And the movie Burlesque comes on. Anybody know this movie? It's fun, right? There's dancing, it's Christina Aguilera. I kind of want to look like her in this movie, and Cher. And they're singing and dancing, and it's like fun, and right? So we get up, and we're like dancing and having fun. And then afterwards, we all go back to our cube. And I realized that we are more alike than unalike. We're all singing and dancing and finding joy. We're having fun in prison. And one of the girls says to me, hey, can you teach me how to Bollywood dance? To which I was like, that's kind of a trick question because all of us Indians think we know how to Bollywood dance. I can try to teach you, but I don't have any music. So she's like, well, but I'll just hum this really popular song. So I would like to invite every single one of you, if you're able, to please stand. And Elliot and Scott, please join me on stage. This is what you get for getting to be friends with me. Come on. Elliot and Scott, come on. Fast, fast, fast. We're running out of time. Come on. It's going to be fun. Everyone up? All right. Yes. So, this is what I did. I'm sitting in county jail. And my new sisters, who are now human beings that are in my life, asked me to teach them how to Bollywood dance in the worst of the worst places. I start teaching them how to Bollywood dance. So she starts humming the song. They would, oh, we got it, we got it. Woo! Okay, ready? So you put your hands up. Okay, shake your shoulders up and down. Open and close light bulb and put your hips into it. You got it. Everyone's got it? Thank you, guys. Okay, I'm not done yet. Okay, I do need my slides. I need my slides back so I can finish with the story. Sorry, we went way over, but I have to finish. Okay, so,
excuse me.
Yes?
Sorry, I did have a question about prison.
That's okay. Please ask. By the way, this is the QR code. While we're asking questions, sorry, Carmel, a couple minutes. This is the QR code. If you guys want to scan, you'll get all the slides. There's a toolkit. Please give me some feedback. Feel free, please. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it was a bit of a silly question, but what was your most ingenious food that you came up with while you were cooking?
Ooh, I love this question. Okay, by the way, my book is coming out in a month, and I have 4 of them in my book as prison hacks to start each part. The best thing I made, did you read about this somewhere? Because I've never had this question. I learned how to make prison chocolate truffles in prison. And you might ask, how do you do that? You might ask somebody who works in the kitchen to bring you buttercream and cream cheese and like swipe them because they work there. And I would buy these like fake Oreos and hot cocoa and chocolate bars. You could buy Hershey's chocolate. And then I kind of swiped chocolate milk from the chow hall. And I would like crush everything together, mix them all up, and I'd put them all into these little balls, and I'd lay them out to dry. And then they were like actually quite delicious. And those fake Oreos I found that you could buy them at Dollar Tree. I saw them like after the fact. Okay, so I will definitely say after, I'm here all day, I will take questions, but I want to end with a story and a little video. So when I got home, I testified in this other case, and then I went back to federal prison, and I knew that there was a hearing for me to come home, possibly early. And my attorney had said, the hearing's at 9 on a Friday, call me at 10. I was like, okay. So at 10 o'clock on the dot, on that Friday, I walk up to the wall to these payphones. Do you guys remember what those are? Like payphones. So I pick up a payphone, I dial out like 100 numbers to get out. And my attorney answers, and the first thing out of his mouth is, "You're going home!" Which felt so elation, like it was total elation. I couldn't believe that it was over. And the next call I made was to my parents, and I said, "Mom, Dad can leave now. I'm coming home." And you know what she said? "Dad left an hour ago." Like, that's the kind of faith my parents have. So Dad got there, 5 hours later, I leave, I go, I'll do all the paperwork, I run into my dad's arms, I hug him, Mom had sent clothes for me to change into, and I stop at the first rest stop on the turnpike and tear off prison clothes, put on my own clothes, and I get home, and I had told my parents, don't tell the kids. Because they were coming the next day to visit me in prison. And I wanted to surprise them. So this is the actual video of me surprising my children. Because isn't it all for them? Isn't that why we do this all, right? I had worked my whole life so hard. And I had to go through this experience to recognize, like, really, we're doing it for our children. And can't we all just make better decisions and put these guardrails into place, right? So people ask me all the time, what would you do differently? What if you had had the clarity loop back then? And I think to myself, I don't want to go there and think about that. But this is what I know. I've spent a decade researching. What could have been different? And now you all have a process. So the real question is, what will you do differently? Because every decision you make matters. Every decision you make is creating a story. It's creating a story about the kind of organization you want to have, about the kind of leader you want to be, about the kind of trust you want to create in your teams. And I'm 100% confident that every one of you can rise and create a leadership style where you decide what story will your decisions create. Thank you so much. I'm Rashmi.